This account was given to me by two women who kept silence for 11 years. This is the first time it has been told. Three women went to their pastor because their children were suffering and they didn't know what to do. Exactly as many of us will do when doctors have no answers and our prayers seems to go nowhere. We are almost likely to turn to the person we trust most with our spiritual life, and that person is our pastor. These women trusted and followed his instructions without question, and they went where he told them to go. On a Thursday night, these women were standing in between a river and a forest, and after doing what their pastor asked them to, by Saturday morning, one of them was dead. And this pastor told his congregation that the dead woman was the reason the other two were suffering, and that her death was not a tragedy, but rather a deliverance. The problem is, the other two women knew what happened, but they chose to remain quiet for 11 years. And today, we'll go into their story and find out what really happened that night. Now, let me bring you up to speed of the kind of community we are dealing with today, so that we can properly understand what happened and why it happened. In many parts of rural Cameroon, the forest is not just trees, and the rivers are not just for consumption. These nature elements, according to the people, are also alive, same as humans. And these people have lived beside it for generations. To them, they hold things and they remember things. The boundary between the village and the forest and the rivers, between the world of the living and whatever exists in those trees and rivers at night, is one that is taken very seriously. This is the world where these three women grew up in, where spiritual is part of everyday life. It runs through the birth of a child, the death of someone. Sickness and healing are all connected to the spiritual world. Sickness and healing are all connected to something larger than what we can see. And in the midst of all of that, they also believe in the God of the Bible. And it is because of this belief that this event happened. And the man who was involved in this is Pastor Mbarga. He was not from the place originally. And as you may know, in many African communities, a pastor who arrives from outside carrying what people understand to be genuine spiritual power is treated with a particular kind of reverence. The truth of the story is that he built his congregation slowly, but one thing that helped him build his reputation was something specific that he could do that other pastors could not. He could identify spiritual attacks on families before the families themselves realized that, and he was right often enough that people stopped questioning how he knew. But one thing people never stop to question is that, does that kind of accuracy means the power comes from above? That is what we are going to find out today in this story. In this same community were the three women. The first woman is called Madeleine, a mother of two, the kind of woman who never missed Sunday service, even when her body told her to stay home. Her children were 6 and 2 years old, respectively. Her oldest child had begun experiencing night terror that they couldn't do anything about. Every night, the child would wake up screaming and describing things in the room that nobody else could see. She was talking about people who should be dead and describing things that are not human. And the pastor became her last hope after doctors couldn't help her in any way possible. Now, put yourself in Madeleine's position. Will you accept your pastor's help or not when he tells you he knows what is wrong and he knows how to fix it? And for Madeleine, she said yes. This is another woman who had one child. Her name is Celeste. Her family had followed an old tradition in their region, tying a small woven cord around the newborn's wrist. This, they said, protects the child from any bad eyes. Also, a physical symbol of the family's prayer that this child is anchored to the living world, that he belongs here, that nothing can call him back too soon. Celeste had kept that cord carefully after her son outgrew it. It was the most sacred object in her home. Her son had begun sleepwalking, not randomly, every night, same direction, to the edge of their compound, facing the forest, standing there in silence, like gazing something that is of immense value. She also went to Pastor Diodun Mbarga. Amara, who is the third woman, is a mother of 3. Her family had been living with what she described as a heaviness. It was not something she could call sadness nor depression. It began with objects moving in rooms nobody had entered, doors opening and closing, a very weird smell that appeared in the house at night and vanishes in the morning. And her youngest, barely 4 years old, had begun speaking and laughing at night in a voice that was not hers, not louder, not angrier, just wrong. Amara and her family knew right from that time that something is wrong. And as much as the family tried whatever means they know to confront what was happening, they couldn't, and she also went to the pastor. After several meetings with the women, the pastor told them not to discuss what they were about to undergo with anyone, including their husbands. As you can see, the secrecy began before anything else. So before the vigil, before the small land between the river and the forest, before any of what came after, the secrecy was the first instruction. What they needed to break before they would be free was that their families were connected by a generational curse, not individual attacks, not separate problems, one curse, moving through the community, finding the weakest door and walking through them. And since they were the ones experiencing the wrath of the curse, the women needed to break the curse on behalf of the whole people. He told them that the reason for the curse coming to hunt them was this. It was an old agreement, an old sin that had never been properly closed. And the only way to close it was to go back to where it came from, and the land between the edge of the river and that of the forest. He told them each woman will bring something deeply personal, something that is connected to the child who is suffering. And he told them he would pray over the objects. He would stand between them and whatever came that night. Before everything, he warned them that whatever will happen, whatever they will see or hear, they were not to speak of it. Imagine you are one of these 3 women sitting in that room. You are desperate. Your child is suffering, and a man of God is telling you he has an answer. The only thing he is asking of you is to trust him completely and keep quiet. What will you do? Drop your answer in the comment section. They went on a Thursday night. Madeleine brought a small cloth that had been wrapped around her daughter during the worst of the night terrors. Celeste brought the woven wrist cord, the most sacred object she owned, the one thing she had kept to protect her son. Amara brought a lock of hair from each of her 3 children, tied together with thread. Pastor Mbarga prayed. He spoke over the objects each woman had brought. He stood between them, the tree, and the river. And then something came to the edge of the forest. And something interesting is that they were at the same place on the same day. But what came there that night, they described it differently. Celeste said she saw a sheep, tall, still, standing just inside the tree line where the light from the candle ended. Not moving, just present. Amara said she heard something that felt like a sound that seemed to come from the land they were standing on. And then, like it was coming from inside her chest rather than from the land she first heard. And Madeleine, well, I did not get her part of the story because by this time, Madeleine was not part of the living, and I will tell you how she left this world. By Friday evening, Madeleine was not herself. She did not eat. She did not speak much. When her children came to her, she held them, but her husband said later that it felt like something holding his children who was not quite Madeleine. By Saturday morning, she was gone. No sign of sickness, no warning. She went to sleep on Friday night, and by Saturday morning, her husband could not wake her. When Madeleine died, she was 31 years old. After her death, Pastor Mbarga said something to his congregation about Madeleine that would eventually go a long way to hurt the community and the two women. He said she had been carrying some sort of bad karma for years, and it tied to her generational curse upon her family. And it was because of the evil spirit upon her life that the covenant Vigil exposed her. He said the very thing inside of her had consumed her. He simply was telling the church that her death was a deliverance for them and not a tragedy. One thing I always ask myself is this: why do they always have a reason when something goes wrong and never do they admit when they are wrong? Now, put yourself in that church for just one moment. How many of us would question that? In that moment, in that environment, without pastor standing before us. The most painful part is that Madeleine's husband, her sister, and her children were all in the church that day. Why these women, Celeste and Amara, said nothing? This is because of the seal. Because he had told them if they broke the covenant, whatever had been bound would return twice the force. And they had children at home. They kept the silence thinking it would protect their families, and it did to a certain point. And when the time was right for whatever needed to come and collect, the silence could not protect their families. Within a year of the vigil, Celeste's son, the boy whose wrist cord his mother had surrendered to the forest that Thursday night, began changing. He began waking at the same hour every night, sitting upright in his bed, eyes open. Then something else began to happen, a slow and deliberate sound, like someone scratching inside the wall, began in the house. Then, in the empty rooms of the house, they started hearing footsteps on the wooden floor in the rooms. Over time, a smell started, and that, only for some strange reasons, comes only at night and was gone by morning. As much as Celeste tried to hold everything together, as much as she tried to be strong for her son, her husband left within 3 years. The man who was supposed to protect the family said the house felt wrong, and every night he felt something in the walls was watching him. Now, imagine living in a home where you know what opened the door and you cannot tell anyone because you made a covenant. Her son was 17 years old when he died. He went to sleep one night and did not wake up the next morning. And Celeste finally understood. The wrist cord she had surrendered was not just an object. It had been her son's protection, his anchor to the living world, and she had placed it in a pastor's hand, who used it to feed something that lived at the edge of the river and the forest. And in Amara's home, the heaviness never left. It only deepened. Her oldest child began hearing voices that directed him, not random sounds, specific instructions. He began doing things the family could not explain and could not stop. And her 4-year-old child, who had spoken in a voice not her own, grew into a child who could not be alone in a room after dark. The child always talked about something standing in the corner of the room, but nobody else could see. It was the death of Celeste's son that broke everything open. When Amara heard the boy had died, she did not go to the funeral immediately. She sat in her house for 3 days, and she counted: Madeleine, dead; Celeste's son, dead; her own 3 children, still suffering in ways that had no end; and the pastor, still standing at the pulpit every Sunday morning, still praying over people, still identifying cases in other families, still building his reputation on the suffering of the people who had trusted him most. On the 4th day, Amara broke the covenant of silence. She called Celeste. It was the first time they had spoken honestly to each other since the Thursday night 11 years before. They talked for hours, and what they discovered, that they had been experiencing the same things separately, that they had both been silent for the same reason, that the pastor had bound them both with the same fear, that everything they had been carrying alone, the other had been carrying it too. This broke something open in both of them completely. As many of us will know, there is a specific kind of relief that comes when you discover that the thing you thought you were alone in, someone else was carrying too. It does not make the pain smaller, but it makes it bearable. And for the first time in 11 years, it was bearable for these women. A Cameroonian man had been carrying fragments of this story for years. He knew about Madeleine. He knew something had happened in that village, and he contacted me. He connected me with Celeste and Amara separately. Without telling either woman, the other was speaking to me. And when I heard both stories, independently, days apart, I realized they were describing the same night, the same forest, the same pastor, the same objects surrendered, the same silence. And I understood that I was not holding 2 stories. I was holding one. The third voice, Madeleine's story, came from her sister, Nadege, who was not at the vigil, who had watched her brother-in-law raise Madeleine's children alone after the pastor called their mother a witch from the pulpit, who had spent 11 years asking questions in a community that refused to answer them. Pastor Diodone Mbarga is still alive. I want you to sit with that for a moment. Everything I have just told you, Madeleine dead at 31, and her children raised without their mother, her name destroyed from a pulpit in front of everyone who knew her, the death of Celeste's son, a pastor who demands your silence is not protecting you. He is protecting himself. And Amara said only this: what I surrendered in that forest, I cannot get back, but I can make sure someone else does not surrender the same thing. This is why they told me. This is why I am telling you. 3 mothers, 1 pastor, 1 forest, 1 river, and the land in between. 1 covenant of silence that cost more than any of them understood when they agreed to keep it. If you have stayed with me until this moment, thank you. Share this video with 1 person.